Byron York. Good morning, Byron. How are you?
Good morning, Morgan. I'm doing well. Thank you.
So I was looking at your Twitter, and I thought your take on the debate was interesting in terms of you just thought, I'm putting words in your mouth here, but the way I read it is that you think this is just pointless, so to speak, without Trump in the debate. Is that right?
Well, it's getting there. I'll actually read what I tweeted. It did get some reaction, and I said at the end of the debate, I tweeted, "This is the third underwhelming, unsatisfying GOP debate. The reason seems obvious. The leading candidate isn't there. That means the stakes are lower. Mm-hmm. 3 debates to identify a first runner-up and second runner-up don't really engage viewers or advance the task of picking a nominee. Obviously, it's not the field's fault that Trump is skipping the debates, and if Trump falters, one of these candidates will be the nominee, but the debates are missing the ingredient that makes high-stakes debates compelling." So that's what I tweeted last night, and I kind of still agree with it this morning.
It makes sense to me. You know, I think out of the 5 people on the stage, I only see 2 people who are actually trying to vie for the nomination. And to me, that's Ron DeSantis and Ambassador Haley. I'm not, listen, I led with Chris Christie's answer on submarines. I thought it was fantastic, but he just doesn't seem, I mean, he's getting booed in early, in Republican Party events that he goes to. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Vivek clearly is just trying to get RTs. I mean, he didn't even make a compelling case. You know, the easiest question in politics that you're supposed to be able to answer is, why should the voters pick you? And he didn't even answer that question. Now, he did something, which will be very popular in social media, and which is he railed against some of the networks and the RNC and things like that. But he never answered the question of why the voters should choose him over Donald Trump. And then Tim Scott, who I also thought, listen, he actually, I read this morning that he got more airtime than anyone else. So he had a lot of great things to say. He just so far, and there's still plenty of time, is not breaking through. Anyway, I don't want to take up all your time, Byron. I just only saw DeSantis and Haley as actually competing for the nomination last night. What do you think?
Yeah, and that's exactly the situation of the race in the polls. But right now, nationally, the Real Clear Politics average of polls, Trump is 43.7 points ahead of Ron DeSantis and 48.9 points ahead of Nikki Haley. So they are, the way I look at it is, it's a one-candidate race. I mean, for a long time, I called it a two-candidate race between Trump and Ron DeSantis. And then, DeSantis fell so much, and Haley rose up, and I thought it's really not a two-candidate race. But it's not a three-candidate race either. It's a one-candidate race with a second contest going on to be the backup in case Trump implodes or is just finally brought down by all the indictments and legal problems that we know are coming to a head next year. So it's an important race. Now, the way you assessed it was, I thought, exactly correct. Chris Christie gives very substantive answers. Hugh was asking all the candidates about the Navy and, like, how many ships would you add? And none of them would answer. And what kind of ships would you add?
Well, DeSantis, to give DeSantis credit, he did say that he has a plan to get to 355 ships.
And Chris Christie finally said, here, I'll tell you what we need. We need nuclear submarines.
Right, exactly.
And so Chris Christie is a substantive candidate. But Republican voters can't stand him. I mean, you look at any polls, and you find the Republican candidate with the highest negatives is Chris Christie. I mean, that's just the way it is, and it's not going to change. Vivek Ramaswamy is a very interesting case. He's just a very sharp, highly verbal guy, and he now has the second highest negatives of any candidate in the race. I believe his peak was in the first 30 minutes of the first debate on August the 23rd, in which people were looking and saying, wow, who is that guy? And by the end of the debate, they were either tired or irritated with him. So he continued that last night. And I will say about the moderators, not just including Hugh, but also Lester Holt and Kristen Welker. From the NBC contingent, I did not have high hopes, and I thought they played it pretty much straight down the middle. there had been I believe, I'm speaking off the top of my head, there had been a CNBC debate a few cycles ago.
I remember that well.
John Harwood took part in it, and it was a scandal. It was terrible. The questions were terrible. There were no questioning from a Republican point of view in a Republican debate. But that didn't happen last night. The debate was mostly down the middle, and I really have no trouble with them. What the bigger problem is what I was saying earlier, which is the structural part of here's another debate for second place.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, because that's what the polling, reflects. It is still Donald Trump's nomination to lose, and could actually be wrapped up as early as Super Tuesday, before he goes to trial. I mean, he's in trial right now, but these are in civil proceedings in New York, not criminal proceedings, which you have actually documented and written about quite prolifically.
Well, the big day, though, is January 15th, the Iowa caucuses, which is the actual day we have voters. And we've seen in the past there have been candidates who had leads who did not survive contact with the voters. So January 15th is the first day we see voters taking action as opposed to talking to a pollster. So I'm not saying that's going to turn out completely different from the way the polls are. But we'll actually get a measure. But what you say about Trump's legal issues is really interesting because they don't coincide precisely with the debate, with the primary schedule. So you have Iowa on January 15th, and then you have New Hampshire, which is usually 7, 8, 9 days later, and then you have this big gap between that and South Carolina toward the end of February. And those are generally, the nominee by the end of that. And no trial of Trump has begun at that point. And his federal trial on the 2020 election in January 6th was supposed to start in March. I think it still is technically supposed to start, but Trump has made some motions in that trial that I think they're going to have to go to a higher court. So I wouldn't be surprised if that delays. So Trump could actually, he certainly has the opportunity to put away the nomination before he actually has to start appearing in courtrooms for his criminal cases. So
exactly,
it's going to be an odd, situation where his opponents are going to be saying, "Look, the guy's going to be in a courtroom all spring and all summer and who knows what, and he's going to get convicted, blah, blah, blah." But it won't actually have started at that time, so it may not be quite as real in the voters' minds.
That, I think that makes a ton of sense. And also, I think it was Politico who pointed this out. Part of the thesis or theory of the candidacy for so many of them last night is that Trump is unable to beat Biden, and that any of them on the stage would argue, I have better polling numbers against Biden. Well, the problem with that is that actually has not been true. If you look at all the recent polling, in fact, Democrats seem to be so worried about former President Trump's polling against Biden that even David Axelrod, the Obama political guru, was, delicately writing and saying that perhaps Biden should not run for re-election. That's how concerned they are that Trump's going to win again. Yeah, well, a lot of Republicans who want to move on from Trump, they're kind of on a spectrum, but from never Trumpers to just he did a great job, but it's time to move on. A lot of people in that position have made the electability argument. Donald Trump can win the nomination, but he cannot win a general election. Well, the most recent round of New York Times polls that set off a frenzy inside Democratic circles really dealt a huge blow to the electability argument, because it showed Trump winning in 5 of the 6 key swing states. Now, it showed Nikki Haley winning by more, but it still showed Trump winning. So the electability argument against Trump is on my support. Well, Byron, I hope we're on TV together again soon. Love being on with you. Thank you for dialing in.